Today's video is my reaction to each of the 4 officers responsible for George Floyd's murder being sentenced in the federal civil rights case. To summarize what we're talking about today, each of the officers have now been either tried in federal court or have pled guilty and have received their federal prison sentences. Derek Chauvin, the officer who actually killed Floyd, received a 21-year sentence to run concurrent to, in other words, at the same time as the 22.5-year sentence he received in the Minnesota State Court. That means he will receive no additional time in jail. Officer Tao, the officer that was standing between the crowd that was actually trying to help Floyd and his fellow officers who were suffocating Floyd, he was sentenced to 3.5 years in federal prison. Then you may recall there were 2 officers who were on top of Floyd as Chauvin was suffocating him. There was Officer Lane. He received 2.5 years in federal prison. And then there was Officer King, and he has been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. So let's talk about how we really feel about these sentences. I'm gonna be honest, reaction videos are difficult because as a human, there's my reaction, right? My reaction as a Black woman in America who has a Black husband, Black father, Black uncles, nephews who are like my sons, all of whom will likely fall victim to a negative police encounter at some point in their lives if they haven't already. Then there's my reaction as an attorney, a criminal defense attorney no less, an attorney who loves the law and believes that it should be applied appropriately based on the circumstances that come before the court. Because that is the way I want the law to be applied to my clients in both federal and state court. So my human reaction is that these sentences are not long enough. There's no way they could ever be long enough. An appropriate sentence for each of them, from my human perspective, would be to send them to prison for the rest of their lives and every single day allow a fellow inmate to put their knee on their necks for 9.5 minutes while the correction officers just stand by and watch without rendering help or medical attention, and then do it all over again tomorrow. But thank God that's not the way our system works. That's not the way our world works, and that's certainly not the way our justice system works in America. Not for their sake, not for all of our sake. Our federal sentencing scheme is based on a set of guidelines and factors that federal judges should consider in sentencing a defendant. The court must consider the crimes of which they were convicted, which in this case were all civil rights violations. For the 3 assisting officers, those violations being recklessly depriving Floyd of his right to medical aid or help. Then the court must consider the whole person, the whole defendant that's being sentenced, right? Not just their bad conduct on the day of the crime, but every other factor in who they are that makes them who they are before they ever came before this court, including all the good they did before that day. This is what we federal lawyers call the 3553A factors. So in balancing all of that as it relates to the officers who assisted Chauvin in Floyd's murder by either act or omission, under the federal sentencing guidelines, I can respect how the court arrived at those sentences. I would want the same for my clients in considering the whole person. Now, as to Chauvin, considering the range available to the court for his crimes, again, I respect the court's sentence. However, Chauvin received an extra benefit here by being allowed to serve his sentence concurrent to his state court sentence, meaning at the same time. This is frustrating because the crimes in state court were for his actual death, while the crimes in federal court were for violating his rights. George Floyd was a human who had both a life and breath in his body and civil rights granted to him by the Constitution. And in my opinion, those are 2 different things. So I don't necessarily agree with this 2-for-1, but again, it's allowable by our federal sentencing guidelines. So as an attorney, I have to respect it. I just truly hope that these same considerations and benefits apply to all citizens that come before that court and in that jurisdiction equally. And more than anything, I'm really glad that they were held responsible at all, because that's not always the case. So that's my reaction. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want more reaction videos from Katie the Closer TV, please subscribe for future video notifications.